I have now watched a rookie minicamp practice and an OTA practice. And I want to ask you a question. I actually had to call somebody this morning, Brian, somebody somebody that worked in pro football for a long time, who said, it's hard to know what we saw last season because the coaching really suffered. You believe in math and data. Can you quantify good versus bad coaching beyond just the record's bad, that sort of thing?
I think you can look at certainly going forward on fourth down in key situations would. Maybe a good coach, bad coach is the wrong terminology, but certainly like forward-thinking coach would work. Being able, a modern NFL coach would certainly work as well as a moniker. Because we're seeing, more fourth down, at least going for it more on fourth down. Obviously, the passing game has come, much more prevalent due to it being much more lucrative. I think there's certainly analytical ways that you can look at it. Right now, I'm actually looking at Cliff Kingsbury's offense during his time with Arizona to kind of get a sense of did he pass more often in first and 10 or an inherited first down as opposed to like the first down of the drive, that sort of thing. So there's a lot of different ways that we can go about looking at the tendency of coaches. And, obviously it's a little bit different with him being an offensive coordinator, but my guess is you don't bring a guy like, Kingsbury in if you're not going to let him have the keys to the car.
About the leadership qualities, does that play into effect?
No, that's something, and this is what we've talked about before. A lot of times these all-in-one metrics, there are so many things that we can't capture. Like we can't capture, someone's presence in the locker room. We can't capture, the desire of someone. Let's say they're spurned by their original club, and then they go ahead and sign with the divisional rival, right? Like that type of stuff, we just can't quantify. I would think, leadership, it when you see it, right? Like, when you're in a room with somebody, if they have command of the room, if they're charismatic, if they're able to build people up. There's, look, I've been around a lot of people, coaches, managers, salespeople, they'd rather tear people down, but there's a certain subset that really pump people up.
Mm-hmm.
You see those people from a mile away.
Yeah. With Kingsbury's offense specifically, I asked him, he kind of talked about having to go not slow, but like there's a distinct approach to bringing more onto Jayden's plate. And he talked about the success with Kyler Murray, where year 1 to year 2 to year 3. What do you make of trying to install an offense with a rookie quarterback? Is there any way to know the right way?
Well, no. Well, they probably do, right? Because I've talked to him. They've obviously dissected film. I'm sure there's a conversation. At least I hope there would be a conversation of, what do you like to do? What do you don't like to do? They probably know his, strengths and weaknesses. And, it has to be slow. That's why, injuries, this early in the season, training camp or just not being in camp, not being able to get the familiarity is so crucial for rookies, quarterback in particular. The more repetitions you have, the more everyone can get, the longer the time everyone has to get on the same page can only benefit them. And as I said before, there are so many moving parts to this organization, not just the offense, just the organization from top to bottom. It's going to take time, and we may not see it year one. And that to me is okay. But you have to think with just the way that they've brought people in, they brought coaches in that were familiar with some players. They probably had a beat on it being, Jayden for quite a while. I think everything's going to be fine.
I think a lot. Don't you think it comes down to the actual quarterback? This is very similar to when you're trying to install a scheme to an offense. What if he can handle more? You can't go too slow. Then you're going to make him bored. Like all the work he puts into it, I can see this dude picking it up quick as hell. Now, going out and then have to show them the understanding of it, that's a different story. But I think ultimately, from what I've heard about him and the way you see him putting in work, it may not take as long as it takes some other quarterback.
It might not. And, we talked about that to me is part of leadership. Like, you need to know when to put your foot on the gas, and you also need to know when to take it off and maybe put it in reverse, right? Like, if you're seeing that they're doing well, absolutely make the plays more complex, add some reads, add. But then if the struggles start, like, you have to be sensitive to that and be able to retool it on the fly. And, let's face it, it's not so much, Jayden as it is also, the receivers that he's working with, and injuries happen, and how do those impact what they're able to run. So yeah, there's a lot of flexibility that needs to be inherent in the quarterback position. And, again, if they didn't think that he was able to do this, he wouldn't have been picked number 2.
Exactly.
So all signs point to Green there. But it's interesting. It's interesting to see, how they bring him along, and who knows? Like I said, the opponents Washington has on paper are not the toughest in the league. Now, what they do with that is we're going to find out. But you have a chance here to start the turnaround in week 1, right? Like we may talk about week 10 that is still a work in progress, but there's a good chance week 1 is, I don't want to say it's the low point, but it could be very close to the floor of the offense, and then everything could just get better from there.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at the schedule, I think there's a chance here. You never know, right? Like, schedules change dramatically every year, and they kind of change. If strength of schedule in May was such a dominant determinant of outcomes, then people wouldn't lose so much money betting, right? Like,
you're right. You're absolutely right.
They play the games for a reason. You never know what the hell's going to happen. But their schedule does seem to break down pretty well. The biggest keys for me, and I think this is coaching, scheme. There's just so much that this will come down to. And Daniels is almost like a separate cat. You know how, I believe this is true, Greenberg, and maybe you know this. When Congress, like the Capitol Hill, when Congress determines the budget for the year, there's the budget, right, that has roads and schools and welfare and Social Security, all that, right? And then there's a separate budget for the military. That's how they operate. They got their own budget. Like, Jayden Daniels is his own category. If he's good, they'll be good. Like, it's kind of that simple. But, dude, I look at two guys that spoke yesterday that I got to ask some questions and just interact with. Jahan Dotson offensively, Emmanuel Forbes defensively. If they get Dotson back to how he performed his rookie season, and he seemed pretty pissed at how he played last year and said he's gotten in the weight room, the training room, all that stuff. And then if they can get what Forbes said yesterday that was fascinating is that the Cowboys brought him in for a top 30 visit, and that Quinn and Witt liked him. And that staff has a good track record of getting the most out of their corners. What do you think needs to happen, Greenberg, for Dotson and Forbes? Dotson to get back on track and Forbes to show why he was a guy that was a first rounder in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, Forbes was, for lack of a better term, he was just abused by the top wideouts out there, almost week after week. And there seemed to be the mindset of the coaching staff that, we toss you into the pool and we'll see if you can learn how to swim. Some people that works for, other people it doesn't. And, I don't necessarily agree with that tact with rookies because it's their first year in the league. You don't want their confidence to be shaken, and then they try too hard, and they're trying to jump the ball, and the receiver gets a layup into the end zone, et cetera, et cetera. So I think they have to put him they have to utilize him in a way that focuses on his strengths and doesn't expose him too quickly to these top wideouts that it appeared that he wasn't ready for. Now, maybe scheme changes, the additions to the defense, maybe that helps. We'll wait and see. As far as Dotson, like you said, I mean, they need big playmakers, and they have Terry McLaurin, obviously, and if they're able to have Dotson, do what he's capable of doing, it's tough to find a better wide receiver duo in the NFL, right? Like if we're talking about potential, that potential, that ceiling is very high. It gives Jayden Daniels a lot to work with. So they just have to, make sure it's success. And to reiterate your point, I mean, personally, I think if Jayden Daniels has a successful season and it shows that he can be a very capable NFL quarterback, I don't want to say the wins don't matter, but they kind of don't matter, right? Because you're looking at big picture, and if you can find the building block at quarterback, everything else starts to become easier in year 2 and year 3. So
that's,
I think
that's easy for you to say.
True.
And maybe me and JP to understand. But all the idiots on social media, they'll lose their minds.
But I
think it's but you're right. The coaches can't be concerned about that.
I'd also add though that I agree with you. Big picture, if you find the quarterback, then that first season, Joe Burrow got hurt and only played, I want to say like 13 games, but they knew they had the guy, and the rest of it didn't matter. They've since been to a Super Bowl, AFC title games, right? Like if it's proven that that's the guy, that is the most important part of this year. But I honestly think if it's proven that he is the guy, I think they're going to be pretty competitive this year.
They could be, yeah, absolutely right. I'm just saying if like the wheels fall off the rest of the bus, and all you have is like, Jayden Daniels, Wile E. Coyote style, just in like the seat with the steering wheel, like, rolling towards the cliff. No Cliff Kingsbury pun intended. I think it's fine. Because you got look at it this way. Like if you have the guy, your window is now like 5 or 6 years, right? Because you have him like 4 years on an entry-level contract. You have the option to the 5th. If he's not the guy, your window becomes like 2 years because you have to make sure he's not the guy, and then you have to get the other guy and see, who's going to be the guy.
Yeah.
So, if he ends up being the building block that everyone thinks he could be, then I would say the wins don't matter because you're looking at a bigger picture of winning the division, getting into the playoffs, and being successful in the playoffs.
I'm with you.
The two guys you mentioned, Forbes, Dotson. Okay, I think back to the 1991 football team here in Washington. They had the Hogs and an outstanding D-line. And those two was as good as any because they were in the top 3 in offense and defense. If Forbes becomes a lot better, Jahan gets better, that competition in practice will make them better. So having good people on each side, just like I'm reading a little thing where Bobby Wagner called out Cosme for something yesterday.
It wasn't like a call. He saw something.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. How often did we have defensive players who could tell an offensive player, you're giving off something, don't do that. So I think this type of thing is going to help this team tremendously, just having some experienced guys that are damn good at what they do.
My thought with Forbes specifically is he's a liability against the run. I don't know that that's going to change. But put him in a position where he's such an asset to you. Like they liked him for these ball hawking skills, right? Yeah. He's got to play outside. Like put him in a position where he's such an asset that you can deal with the liability side.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like I do think position, scheme, strategy can make a big difference.